Android versus iPhone, the question of the ages, and we're probably never going to get an answer. Of course, iPhone and Android have become a lot more similar over the years rather than different. So today we're going to talk about some features that still Android does have that iPhone does not. And I should point out, this is not going to be a video that's talking about, oh, which is better, Android's better because it has these features. No, that's not the point of this video. It's just to be informative, a little bit fun, and you know what? I might even make a video talking about iPhone features that Android doesn't have in the future. Who knows? But I do know that a lot of you guys who are watching are mostly Android users, so I think you'll find this one pretty interesting. Let's get started. First up, we have multiple users and guest accounts, which is something that's never been available on iPhone. And basically, like it says, you can actually create multiple users on your Android phone, just like you might on your computer or something like that. So you can log in and each person has like their own password, their own files, their own text messages, emails, that sort of thing, and they're all separate and not accessible from the other. Of course, unless maybe the one user is an admin and the other one is just set as a guest, it might be a little bit different, but still. So between each user, the data is going to be separated. So that is going to include things like I just mentioned, emails, text messages, also things like files or music, photos, that sort of thing. And users can actually install apps separately. So if one user installs an app, then the other user won't get that app installed onto their account. However, if both accounts do have an app installed, then the updates will be shared. So if one user updates it, it'll be updated on the whole phone. And there's also a couple other settings that might be shared between accounts, for example, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth networks. Next up, another feature on Android that's not on iPhone is full USB access when you're plugging it into the computer to the file system. So with iOS, when you plug in the iPhone into the computer, it kind of asks you if you want to trust the computer, and then it'll give you access to basically just the cameras folder with the photos and videos and that sort of thing, but that's about it. On Android, there are different settings, like you can actually have it set to only charge with USB even if it's plugged into a computer, or give it full USB access so it will access the rest of the file system, with some exceptions like no system files obviously, but you'll get access to different app folders. So not just the cameras folder, but if an app creates data in there, then you'll be able to access that as well. Now, this next one is definitely a huge one, and that is home screen customization and like the launcher or widgets, that sort of thing. On iOS, there's no widgets that you can put on the home screen, and if you don't like the design of the home screen, that's kind of tough. You have to keep it how Apple devised it. But with Android, you can customize so much. So first of all, you can change the entire launcher, which is basically the entire skin or theme of the phone, assuming your phone manufacturer allows that. And I don't even think I can get into the differences that would allow, because it literally changes pretty much everything for the look and feel of the phone. But in terms of other customizations, even if you're using the stock launcher, you can do things like adding widgets, which adds different types of not just shortcuts to the home screen, but you can also have it display information like clocks or emails you haven't read, that sort of thing. So on iOS, you can't do any of this. Another interesting thing is how you can have app shortcuts on the lock screen in Android. So for example, you can have multiple of the same app shortcut on the home screen in different locations, or you can just completely remove an app shortcut from the home screen if you don't want to have it on there at all, but you still want the app installed, in which case you can like swipe up into the list of all apps and access it through there, which is great if there's like apps that you don't really use that often at all, but you still want to have it. Whereas if you want to do that on iOS, you kind of have to create like a junk apps folder in there for apps that you don't use very often. So customization is going to be a huge difference when it comes to Android versus iOS, and Android definitely is a winner on that side. Next up, another one that is really important is default app selection. So with iOS, you really can't change the default of some certain types of apps. For example, you can't change the phone app to be different. You can't change the text message app to be different, where you can actually use non-default or stock apps with Android. For example, one popular alternative app for texting on Android is called Textra. That's the one that I mostly used when I was using Android. And that allows you to do so much more customization. You can do things like change the color of the bubbles. You can change the notification types. You can have it change the LED notification light color when you get a text message, all sorts of things. Other examples of that app is you can have like different background images for the text conversations, and you can even have it so it displays different emoji themes. So even if you're on Android and all your friends use iOS, then you can actually have it show iOS emojis, and then you can actually see the exact ones they're saying as well, even though you're on Android. Now, there are some limited selections for default apps on iOS that you can choose. For example, the default Photos app, the default Maps app, but it's not nearly as extensive as it is on Android. For example, I did mention also the dialer app. You can't change that on iOS. Now, next up, for the ultimate customization of your phone, that's going to require rooting your phone. Now, you cannot do this on iOS nearly as easily. There is a thing called jailbreaking, but Apple makes it extremely hard. Usually, you're not able to update your phone very often because they are constantly breaking these jailbreaks. But on Android, typically, it's a lot easier, and most manufacturers do allow you to root your Android phone. And all that means is when you root an Android phone, you get root access to the phone, which just means you have complete 100% control over the entire phone, all of its files, including system files. Nothing is off limits. This allows you to do some pretty advanced things that normally you would never be able to do on your phone, although you can typically do a lot of this stuff on your regular computer because that's not locked down nearly as much as phones are. These include things like changing the CPU frequency so you can overclock your phone. You can also do more complete backups that are more like mirror images, whereas if you're not rooted, then you can only back up certain restricted amounts of data, not system files, and not certain protected files from each apps. Whereas if you are rooted, you can use something like Titanium Backup, which can then back up literally everything on the phone if you want, and then you can restore it completely. You can also do a lot more in terms of power management and restricting background uses of apps and that sort of thing. You can even do crazy stuff because you have complete control over the entire phone. You can even install Linux on it on certain phones, for example. So just like you would with a regular computer, you have complete control. You can pretty much do anything on the phone as long as the phone is physically capable of doing it. Now, moving on, the next feature has to do with side-loading apps. Now, on iOS, you are restricted to using the Apple App Store, and that's pretty much it. Now, technically, you can sideload apps if you have a developer account, or there might be other ways to do it if you have Mac OS using Xcode, but it's a lot more difficult. Whereas on Android, you can sideload apps that are not just from the Google Play Store. You can install from the Google Play Store, but you can actually use other Play Stores. For example, Amazon has their own app store that is completely separate from the Google Play Store, and they have their own apps with their own pricing on that side. Or you can install any app that is not from any app store at all. That's technically what sideloading is. And you have to enable a certain setting in the Android settings called Install Unknown Apps. But after you do that, really it's just a matter of changing a setting and then you can do it. This is great if you want to install an app that maybe didn't get approved for the Google Play Store, or Google didn't deem it worthy of being on the Play Store or something like that. Well, if you just want to go on the developer's website, they might have it to download directly, and then you can still install it on your phone. Of course, you have to be very careful when doing this, because if you're just downloading some random file off the internet and installing it, that also means it could be malicious. So you have to make sure you actually trust the website that you're getting these side-loaded apps from, because they don't have that little bit extra layer of protection of that being screened from being on the Play Store and that sort of thing. So you have to be a little bit more careful, but you are able to do it if you want. All right, now those are all software features that are on Android but not iPhone. So now we could talk about some hardware features that are on many Android phones but not iPhone. So these might not be considered Android features per se, because obviously there's so many different manufacturers of Android, but that also is an advantage. With iPhone, if there is a feature that you want but Apple doesn't put it on the phone, well, that sucks. But if you're on Android and you want a specific hardware feature, then you have a lot of choice. You can just go to the manufacturer that adds that feature. There's a lot more competition. A major one of these features is expandable storage, which has never been available on iPhone. If you didn't like the storage you had on iPhone, you had to buy it up front and buy the more expensive model. Whereas on Android, if you want more storage, a lot of these phones do have an SD slot. You can just pop it in, get more storage that way. And a lot of times it is significantly cheaper to just buy a quite large micro SD card than it is to buy the larger model or larger storage size model of the phone up front. Another pretty common hardware feature on Android phones is either a notification LED light or an always on display, especially on OLED screens. So this is not available on iPhone at all. If you want to check if you have a notification, you have to turn on the screen. Whereas on Android, at least a lot of the times, you'll have the option to have an always on display, so you can see like the time or some notifications, at least see the icon. Or if it's not an OLED, most of the time you'll get an LED light, so you can see visually if you have a notification without seeing the initial screen light up when you first get that notification. So that's definitely a common feature on Android, and I would consider that a typical Android feature, whereas on iPhone, you don't get any of that. Of course, there's plenty of other hardware features, some more common than others. One big example obviously might be headphone jack, but that's on fewer and fewer phones these days for some reason, though on iOS, you can't get it at all. And then of course you have things like the fingerprint scanner, which is pretty much the standard on all Android phones as terms of security. A lot of Android phones do have facial ID security, but it's not nearly as good as it is on Face ID on iOS. Now, I strongly prefer having a fingerprint sensor over Face ID, but because Apple does only do Face ID, you would expect that it would be way better on iOS, and it actually is, but I still prefer the Touch ID. And actually, a lot of manufacturers now are developing under-screen fingerprint sensors, which I really hope iOS does add, but I'm not holding my breath. They pretty much doubled down on this Face ID thing. I guess we'll have to see. So again, those are just the major ones, and there's plenty of other super minor features that are in various models that I'm not going to talk about, so don't blame me for saying, oh, well, the IR blaster is an Android feature. It's like, okay, some phones have it, but not really. So those are just the major ones. Now, if there are any other major features that I did not mention, feel free to let me know down in the comments, and we could talk about that down there. If you like this video, let me know what you think down in the comments, and if you want to keep watching, I'll put some other videos right here. You can just click on those, and if you want to subscribe, I make a couple videos a week, so it should be worth it. But in any case, thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.